Imagine this. It's a warm, humid summer day in 1518. You're walking down a narrow cobblestone street in Strasbourg. The sun beats down mercilessly. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, baking rye bread, and something sharper, fear. Suddenly, a woman steps barefoot out of her half-timbered house. She starts moving. Not dancing. Convulsing. Her arms flail wildly. Her head snaps back with violent jerks. Her bare feet pound the stones again and again, faster and faster, until the skin splits and blood begins to smear the ground. And she doesn't stop. Not for hours. Not for days. Here's the insane part. Within weeks, hundreds of people join her. Men, women, children, priests, beggars, the whole city seems to be swallowed by the frenzy. Their feet are raw meat. The cobblestones glisten slick with fresh blood. They scream for help between gasps, but their bodies refuse to listen. Their eyes are glassy and vacant. Their faces twist in pure terror. They dance day and night with no food, no sleep, their muscles burning, hearts racing, until they collapse from exhaustion or drop dead from heart attacks and strokes right there in the street. Chroniclers recorded that at its peak, up to 15 men, women, and children were dying every single day. What the hell was happening in Strasbourg that summer? Was it poison? A curse? Demonic possession? Or something far darker hiding inside the human mind? Stick around, because this true story is way weirder than any horror movie you've ever seen. It all began on July 14th. A woman named Frau Trophia stepped onto that same street and began her endless dance. Her husband begged her to stop. Neighbors stared in horror. She couldn't. By the fourth or fifth day, 30 more people were jerking and spinning beside her. By the middle of August, the number had exploded to nearly 400. The streets turned into a nightmare parade of twitching, leaping, sweating bodies that simply would not rest. The city officials were terrified. Doctors examined the dancers and blamed an imbalance of hot blood. Their official solution? More dancing. They quickly built wooden stages in the market squares and guild halls. They hired professional musicians with pipes and drums. The music began to echo through the narrow streets, day and night, relentless, hypnotic. The city council literally paid these musicians to play louder, believing the dancers would simply exhaust the madness out of their systems. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the scene. The sun is blazing. The air is thick with dust and the metallic smell of blood and sweat. You hear the non-stop pounding of hundreds of feet on stone, the same frantic rhythm over and over. You hear the crying. The screaming. The pipes and drums that never stop, growing louder as more bodies collapse around them. Now open your eyes. That was Strasbourg in the summer of 1518. Instead of curing the plague, the music only fed it. The rhythm pulled in even more victims. People who had been watching from doorways suddenly stepped out and joined the dance. The so-called cure was spreading the nightmare faster than anyone could control. Men and women were literally dancing themselves to death while musicians were paid to keep playing. Back then, explanations were limited to the supernatural. Some whispered about demonic possession. Others blamed a curse from Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers and epileptics. They said if you failed to honor him properly, he would force you to dance until you dropped. In desperation, the authorities carted some victims off to his shrine, hoping for a miracle cure. None of it worked. To truly understand why this happened, we need to look at what life was like in Strasbourg just before the dancing began. The region had been stalked by famine for years. Crops failed repeatedly. Floods had drowned entire villages along the Rhine. Smallpox and syphilis tore through families, leaving survivors scarred and terrified. The church preached constantly about hellfire, sin, and divine punishment. People were not just hungry or sick, they were exhausted, desperate, and living in a constant state of fear. Their minds were already trembling on the edge. When Frau Trophia stepped out and started dancing, her neighbors didn't see a woman having a breakdown. They saw the beginning of a curse. They saw divine judgment in motion. And in that pressure cooker of anxiety, their own minds followed her straight into the nightmare. Modern experts have debated two main theories for decades. The first is ergot poisoning. Rye bread was the staple food, and in wet years a fungus called ergot grows on it. When eaten, ergot can cause violent convulsions, hallucinations, and spasms, almost like a bad LSD trip mixed with physical agony. Some have suggested the entire city was tripping on contaminated bread. It sounds plausible at first. But many historians, including John Waller, argue it doesn't fully fit. Ergot usually causes intense pain, blackened limbs from restricted blood flow, and loss of coordination, not the ability to dance rhythmically for days on end. Plus, there were no widespread reports of the classic gangrenous symptoms or mass vomiting that normally accompany ergotism. And why did similar outbreaks keep happening specifically along the Rhine and Moselle rivers, even in years with different weather? The ergot theory leaves too many questions unanswered. The stronger explanation today is mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called mass hysteria or conversion disorder. In times of extreme collective stress, the human brain can unconsciously catch symptoms from others. One person breaks down and starts dancing from overwhelming anxiety. Others, already primed by the same fears and the widespread belief in St. Vitus' curse, begin to mimic the behavior without realizing it. Their minds convert psychological terror into physical movement. The cultural script was already there: if you're cursed, you dance. And once it started, it spread like a virus, but through minds and eyes instead of germs. We've seen echoes of this in modern times: sudden fainting outbreaks in schools, twitching epidemics linked to social media stress, or even the Tourette-like tics that spread among teenagers during the pandemic. The dancers of 1518 weren't faking it. Their bodies had genuinely lost control because their minds had surrendered to the terror around them. Think about how fragile that makes us. In the right, or wrong, conditions, our own brains can betray us and turn the body into a prisoner of collective fear. The dancing continued from mid-July all the way into early September. Then, as mysteriously as it had begun, it simply started to fade. The city council finally banned most music and public dancing. They sent more victims to the shrine. Exhausted bodies gradually slowed down and stopped. No one knows exactly how many died. Dozens for certain, possibly as many as 100. The records are chilling but incomplete. And this wasn't the first dancing plague. Similar outbreaks had swept through Europe in 1374 and other years, mostly along the Rhine Valley. But 1518 remains the largest and best documented case in history. The dancing plague of 1518 ended as mysteriously as it began. No one knows exactly why. No one knows how it finally broke. But the next time your legs feel strangely heavy, the next time your body doesn't quite move the way you want it to, remember Frau Trophia. Remember the streets slick with blood. Remember the pipes and drums that refuse to fall silent. And ask yourself, what's really in control, you or the fears you carry inside? If you made it this far, you're one of the rare people who can handle the deepest, darkest dives into history. Hit that like button if this story sent a chill down your spine. Subscribe for more stories that mess with your head in the best possible way, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that history is far weirder, and far scarier, than fiction. Stay curious. Stay weird.